Lena had always enjoyed the rush of going viral, the endless attention, the flood of likes, the sense of being seen. But one evening, everything changed. A strange account began following her, leaving unsettling comments that seemed to know more about her than anyone should. At first, she tried to ignore it, but the messages became more personal, more invasive. It wasn't just a random stalker, this person knew where she went, what she did, even what she was thinking. And soon, it wasn't just digital harassment. They were watching her, following her every move. Now, Lena was trapped in a nightmare where nothing was safe, and no one could help. The clock struck midnight, and the only sound in the room was the quiet hum of Emma's laptop. A pale, sterile glow filled her small, cluttered room. Papers scattered across the floor, empty coffee cups, textbooks piling up in the corner. The usual comforting chaos of a college student's living space. She was alone, surrounded by the familiar mess that signified freedom, but tonight, something felt different. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, pausing as her eyes scanned her social media feed. She opened her Instagram first, like she always did. Scrolling through her feed, Emma's mind was a haze of familiar faces and superficial captions. No surprises, no disturbances. A few likes here and there, the occasional comment from her friends or acquaintances, and a couple of heart-eye emojis. She felt the low buzz of her phone vibrate in her pocket, an automatic reflex making her swipe it out and glance at the screen. Another notification, this time from a stranger. She paused, fingers frozen in midair. The account had no profile picture, just a random jumble of letters and numbers. Who even follows me like this? She thought, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. But curiosity got the better of her, and she clicked on the notification. A single like on her latest photo. She glanced at the profile once more, scanning for any signs of life beyond the generic name. Nothing. Emma shrugged and continued her scrolling. She had gotten used to the random likes and follows. It was part of the game. But for some reason, that account, the one with the strange name, lingered in her thoughts. She went back to the notification and tapped the profile again. Still nothing. No posts, no stories. The account was essentially a ghost. Her phone buzzed again. Another like, from the same account. Her stomach churned slightly, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. Maybe they're just a bot, she mused, trying to rationalize the odd feeling creeping up her spine. But she couldn't shake it off. She leaned back in her chair, glancing around her room, but there was no one there. No one to explain the gnawing sense of unease that was slowly growing in her chest. She didn't know why, but the strange account made her feel watched. Her mind drifted back to the phone screen. Another like. This time, it was a photo of her and her friends at a concert, taken months ago. She had posted it long before the mysterious account had followed her. The like was so quick, so deliberate. She stared at it. Something didn't feel right. Was this person looking at her entire feed in real time? Her stomach twisted again. She scrolled through her posts, and as if on cue, the account liked a picture of her dog. Then another photo of her eating lunch in a cafe. And another, this time from a birthday party last year. Every like seemed to land so quickly, almost as if someone was waiting for her to post. She was no longer just scrolling aimlessly. Now, her eyes flickered to the notification bar every time her phone vibrated, expecting something. And sure enough, the same account liked another post. It was no longer a coincidence. The sensation of being watched deepened into a heavy pressure on her chest. She'd seen the same pattern of behavior on the news, talked about in warnings and articles. People, usually women, stalked by anonymous figures online who built elaborate, detailed profiles of their lives from what was shared on social media. But that was just something that happened to other people, right? Not Emma. Her phone buzzed again. Another like. This time, it was a close-up photo of her at the beach, taken 2 weeks ago. Emma froze, staring at the image on her phone. The account had liked a photo of her in a swimsuit. Something about it felt different. This wasn't a normal follower. They weren't just liking her photos, they were tracking her. She could feel it. The door to her room creaked slightly, and she jerked her head toward the sound. Her roommate was supposed to be out for the night, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing in the doorway. When she looked back at her phone, the notification bell chimed again. Another like. It was her latest selfie, the one she had posted just hours ago. How could they possibly be so fast? Emma thought, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at the account again, this time searching through every one of its posts. Nothing. It was a blank slate. She couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. The profile gave no clues, only that it had been active for less than a week, liking her posts from the moment it followed her. Her heart rate quickened. A sudden cold wave washed over her as she realized how exposed she was. Her entire life was right there on her feed. What if this account had been watching for weeks? Months? What if they were tracking her in real time? It seemed crazy, but the longer she stared at her phone, the more the idea settled deep into her mind. Emma's thoughts raced. She couldn't just block the account. No, that would be too obvious. They would notice. The thought of this person lingering in the shadows of her social media accounts, following her every move, was enough to make her skin crawl. Her eyes darted back to the feed. Another notification. The same account. Her most recent post, a picture of a new book she had bought. This is it, she thought. This is when it gets weird. She stood up, pacing around her room, trying to think clearly. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe. But then again, maybe not. The intrusive thoughts wouldn't leave her head. What was this person's endgame? Was it just harmless? Or was she unknowingly the target of something much darker? The sound of her phone buzzing again sliced through her thoughts. She had to look. Her heart dropped when she saw the notification, "I've been watching you for a long time now." Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, the cold metal against her skin sharp and unnerving. She opened the message. The account had sent a DM, "I know where you live." She felt the blood drain from her face. Her breath caught in her throat. She stood there, frozen, the phone still in her hand, her eyes wide in disbelief. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. She wanted to scream, to call someone, anyone, but her throat was dry. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, louder than the dull hum of the laptop, louder than the blood rushing in her veins. She hadn't been imagining it. Someone had been watching her. Someone who knew exactly where she was. And that was only the beginning. She had opened a door she couldn't close, and now she had no choice but to follow the path that had been set out for her. Her mind raced, desperate for a plan, a way to protect herself. But she couldn't focus. The world around her felt distant, out of focus. She thought about her friends, her family, and how safe she had always felt before tonight. But now, there was no safety. There was only fear, creeping and curling around her every thought, every movement. Emma stumbled back toward her desk, her eyes flicking around her room as though looking for someone to jump out at her from the shadows. But there was no one. No one but her phone. The message from the anonymous account still blinked on the screen. The words lingered in her mind like poison. "I know where you live." And then, the phone buzzed again. Chris adjusted his headset, the noise-canceling feature making everything feel eerily quiet. The screen in front of him flickered to life as he logged into his favorite gaming platform, ready for another late-night stream. It had become routine, something he did almost every night, to escape the overwhelming reality of his social life. Gaming was the one thing that made him feel connected, but also in control. Tonight, though, something was different. His room, dark except for the glow of his dual monitors and RGB keyboard, felt colder, more oppressive. It wasn't the first time he had streamed, but tonight, every click, every notification, felt heavier. He logged into his channel and was greeted by the usual flurry of comments, "Hey Chris, great game. Bro, you're killing it." He smiled, typed a quick thanks, and then dove into his game, the familiar sounds of gunfire and explosions filling the silence. His character in the game, a heavily armored soldier, stormed through the pixelated battlefield. But there was something odd about tonight. His concentration kept breaking, like something, or someone, was watching him. A ping from the chat pulled him out of the game momentarily. "Hey, Chris, check out my new stream," it said. The username was unfamiliar, but that wasn't too surprising. People were always trying to promote their channels, and it didn't bother him. Still, there was something about the message that sent a chill through his spine. The way the user seemed to know exactly when to pop in. He shrugged it off. It was probably just another viewer trying to get attention. But then it happened again. Another message appeared. "Nice stream, but are you sure you're the only one playing?" Chris frowned, looking at the chat. This one was different, oddly specific. It was a question, but one that seemed more like a statement. The message wasn't necessarily threatening, but the tone felt unsettling, like someone knew something they shouldn't. He glanced over at the username scrolling by, but there it was again, another ping. This time, the message was clearer. "You're not alone, Chris." A cold shiver ran down his spine. He clicked on the username. It was a blank profile, no picture, no posts, no followers. Just a name made of random letters and numbers. His pulse quickened, and a knot formed in his stomach. It wasn't normal for someone to come into a stream and comment like that. Hell, it wasn't normal for anyone to comment like that. He tried to shake it off and focus back on the game, but he couldn't. The sensation of being watched gnawed at him, the feeling that someone, somewhere, was paying way too much attention to him. He kept his eyes on the screen, but the dread continued to build. Another message popped up, "I can see you." Chris's hands froze on the keyboard, his heart pounding. What the hell? He glanced around the room as if expecting to see someone standing in the shadows. His gaming setup was nestled in the corner of his bedroom, away from the door, where he usually felt safe. He always streamed in this little bubble, feeling secure in his own space. But tonight, the space felt alien. The quiet, the isolation, it was suddenly suffocating. Ignoring the message, he pressed on, trying to focus on the game, trying to push the creeping unease out of his mind. But as he began to play, the messages kept coming. Each one more personal than the last. "Isn't that your favorite weapon? Nice shot, but I'm sure you could do better." Chris's breathing became shallow. His palms were starting to sweat, and it wasn't just the heat of the gaming rig. No. Something wasn't right. He paused the game, eyes scanning the chat. The same account, sending message after message, all of them targeting things he hadn't even mentioned. No one should have known those things. The fear that had been gnawing at him escalated into a wave of panic. His mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. Could it be a hacker? Was someone messing with his account, getting into his private details? But how? It wasn't like he had a massive following, not compared to some of the bigger streamers. He was just a kid who played games late at night to forget about everything else. His hands shook as he started typing back, trying to confront the user. "Who are you?" he typed quickly, pressing enter almost immediately. The response came almost as fast. "I'm watching you play." The message was short, cold, and precise. He stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. His stomach twisted. He had never been paranoid before, at least, not about something like this. But now, it was becoming impossible to ignore. How did this person know what he was doing in the game so specifically? What was their goal? The question rattled around his mind, but he was too afraid to ask it aloud, too afraid to even speak it. His chat was still moving with comments from his regular viewers, but the account kept flooding the feed, the comments growing more unsettling with each passing second. "Nice choice of gear. Just like in your last match. I see you're wearing that old hoodie again. You love that thing, don't you?" He froze. No one in the chat had said anything about his hoodie. No one in the stream could see what he was wearing, yet this anonymous account knew. His heart pounded in his chest, a heavy thud that seemed to drown out the sounds of the game. The character on the screen continued to move, though Chris wasn't really controlling it anymore. His mind was too consumed with the unsettling sense of being watched, of being stalked in real time. The screen flickered. A message from the same account popped up, "I'm behind you." A jolt of terror ran through him. The world seemed to spin as his fingers found the mouse and clicked frantically to shut down the stream. But it wouldn't close. The program froze. His screen was locked. He tried to force his computer to restart, but it was no use. Nothing worked. Every movement he made on the mouse, every click, only seemed to make the screen flicker more intensely, as though the program was intentionally rejecting him. He looked around his room, desperate, trying to shake the growing panic. He even checked the windows, the door, convinced that someone was somehow in the room with him. But there was no one. The walls were silent. A cold dread gripped his chest, making it hard to breathe. The flickering stopped. His screen returned to normal. But the chat had stopped scrolling. The comments were frozen. Only one new message had appeared: "I'm in your room." This time, the terror that hit him wasn't just fear, it was pure, paralyzing horror. He stood there, staring at the screen in disbelief, as the image on his monitor seemed to warp. Slowly, agonizingly, a new window popped up on the screen. It was a live stream of his room. His heart stopped. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the camera feed from his own room, displayed on his monitor. It was a distorted, blurry view, but there was no mistaking it. His own bedroom, his own space, was being broadcasted. And the worst part? It was live. The stream continued, showing his every movement in real time. He could see himself, on his own screen, sitting there, dumbfounded, staring at the computer. A chill ran through him. How? How was this happening? His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. He checked the camera app to see if the front-facing camera was on, but it wasn't. The phone was locked, the camera not active. So how? How was this happening? A message popped up on the screen: "I can see you. You're not alone anymore." He could feel the blood drain from his face, his fingers stiff as he slowly pulled the power cable from his laptop. The screen blinked once, twice, and then went black. The silence that followed felt suffocating. In that instant, Chris knew. He wasn't alone. Someone, somewhere, was watching him, alive, in real time, just like he had been watching his game. The strange figure, that silent observer, had now crossed the line. And whatever this person wanted, it was far from over. Lena had always enjoyed the thrill of going viral. There was a rush to it, the sudden influx of likes and comments, the spotlight that came with hundreds of thousands of eyes fixated on her. It was what had gotten her into influencing in the first place, the way people admired her posts, the way they saw her as a beacon of style, humor, and confidence. She thrived on that attention. But now, as she sat hunched over her phone in the dead of night, scrolling through yet another viral post, something felt off. It started a few weeks ago, with a post she thought would go unnoticed. It was just a picture of her wearing a new outfit, nothing special. She didn't expect much. But then, it began to get more attention than any of her previous posts had. A few hundred likes turned into thousands, and then into tens of thousands. Her followers skyrocketed, and soon, everyone was talking about it. Her notifications were flooded with messages, comments, and tags. Brands reached out, influencers started to follow her, and new opportunities began to open up. It was everything she had ever wanted. But then, things took a strange turn. At first, she thought it was just the usual type of comment. "Love this. So cute. You're such an inspiration. Where did you get that top? Need it ASAP." But then there were others, more unsettling comments that started to stand out. "You look so much better in that outfit than anyone else ever could." Or, "You've changed so much since your last post. I miss the old you." It didn't seem threatening, but there was an undertone, a subtle hint that something wasn't quite right. She brushed it off at first, telling herself that maybe it was just the way people commented online, offhand, and without much thought. But the more she scrolled, the more she noticed a pattern. These comments were coming from the same accounts. Strange, anonymous profiles, with no pictures or bias, just random strings of numbers and letters. She couldn't even tell if they were real people. The notifications kept coming, even when she wasn't posting anything. Her phone vibrated constantly, buzzing through the night, even when she was trying to sleep. The strange accounts, always there, watching. One night, Lena woke up to a message. "I miss you," it said. It was from one of those same profiles, no face, no name. Just words. She stared at the screen in confusion, a shiver crawling up her spine. "I miss you?" She didn't recognize the name, didn't remember interacting with this person before. It felt personal. Too personal. And what made it worse was that the account had no history of posts or interactions with her, just the message. She tried to ignore it, but it stuck with her. The next day, as she went through her usual routine, checking her emails, responding to DMs, posting on her stories, the messages continued. The words were always unsettling. You look so perfect today. I love seeing you happy. That smile. It's everything. There was no sign of malice, but the comments were starting to wear on her. Who were these people? Why were they so obsessed with her? Then, one day, something happened that made her question everything. She had posted a photo of herself at a coffee shop, sitting by the window, sipping a latte. It was a casual post, nothing particularly exciting. But the comments were flooding in faster than ever. One of them stood out. It was from the same profile. I know that place. You go there often, don't you? Her heart skipped a beat. The coffee shop she had posted about was one of her regular haunts. It was one of those places she loved because it was quiet, tucked away from the usual chaos of the city. She had never shared that detail with anyone online. How did they know? She quickly checked the profile, but it was gone, disappeared, as if it had never existed. In its place was another, with another string of random letters and numbers. But this time, it was even more personal. I've been following you for months. I know everything about you. The message hit her like a punch in the stomach. Panic flooded her veins, and for the first time in ages, Lena felt a wave of fear she couldn't shake. It wasn't just some troll messing with her anymore. This person was obsessed. They had been watching her, tracking her posts, her movements. She didn't know how, but they had been piecing together the smallest details of her life. She spent the next few hours scrolling through her feed, trying to find any other signs of this person's presence. And that's when she saw it. It was subtle at first, but now it was unmistakable. All her recent posts, her photos, her stories, her check-ins, there was always a comment from one of these strange accounts. Always the same phrase, always too specific, too personal. They knew where she was. They knew what she was doing. And now, they knew what she was thinking. Lena felt like a puppet, with invisible strings pulling at every move she made. Each post, each like, each share, they all felt like invitations to the dark hole of obsession that was opening up around her. She started to wonder how many people were really watching. How many of these strangers were there? Were they just admiring her, or were they waiting for the right moment to strike? A week later, things took a disturbing turn. She received a direct message on Instagram. It was from a new account, again with no picture, no details. Just an anonymous string of letters and numbers. She clicked on it, bracing herself for another cryptic comment, but what she saw took her breath away. The message was simple, but it chilled her to the core. I'm standing outside your window. Her hands trembled as she held her phone, reading the words over and over again. Lena's heart raced. She glanced at the window, her eyes darting to the shadows outside. It was dark, the city lights barely visible in the distance. She was alone in her apartment, but for the first time, she felt anything but safe. It was too late to call anyone, too late to do anything but wait. Her mind raced with thoughts. Was it a prank? A sick joke? Or was it something more? She thought of the many times she had posted pictures of herself standing near that very window, posing in her living room, showing off the view. Had someone been watching all along, waiting for the right moment to send her a message? She immediately checked the account. It had no recent posts, no followers, no activity except for her profile. The message was sent, and that was it. Nothing more. Fear gnawed at her insides. She tried to ignore the growing sense of dread, but every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, it all felt too loud, too close. Every shadow seemed to carry a threat, every gust of wind outside felt like a warning. She messaged a friend, telling them what had happened, but the reply came back late. Her friend suggested it was probably nothing, a prank, or maybe just a weird coincidence. But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that it was far from that. She spent the rest of the night staring at her phone, anxiously waiting for another message, but it didn't come. But the next morning, when she went outside to grab her morning coffee, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. The door to her apartment building was slightly ajar. Just a crack. She didn't remember leaving it that way. Her pulse quickened, and for the first time, she realized how exposed she truly was. She had made herself a public figure, sharing every detail of her life online. She had become a character for the world to watch, to admire, and to criticize. But now, it was something else. She wasn't just being watched, she was being hunted. The idea consumed her, gnawing at her sanity. She spent the next few days in a heightened state of alert, locking doors, checking windows, constantly scanning her surroundings. But no one was ever there. At least, not when she was looking. And yet, every time she opened her phone, the messages kept coming. Always the same words. Always the same anonymity. I'm watching you. You're perfect, Lena. I'll be waiting. They became more cryptic, more sinister, as though the person knew her better than she knew herself. Each message was a reminder that she had opened a door she couldn't close. A door into a world where she was no longer in control. And as much as she tried to pull back from the abyss, it was already too late. The Watcher was waiting, and Lena had become their prey. Jared sat in his small, dimly lit bedroom, staring at his computer screen, the glow from the monitor casting long shadows across the cluttered floor. His room was a mess, dirty clothes strewn across the bed, fast food wrappers piled on his desk, and empty soda cans rolling around the floor like forgotten relics of past nights. It was the typical setup for someone who spent their time online, lost in digital spaces. He had always been a loner, not really fitting into the world outside of his screen. But here, in the realm of online forums and chat rooms, he felt like he could be himself, anonymous, untouchable. Jared had found solace in the darker corners of the internet, the places where people traded stories, shared secrets, and indulged in the kind of content that would make most people cringe. He wasn't a part of those mainstream, happy-go-lucky communities, he was a part of something raw, something real. But it wasn't just the content that kept him coming back, it was the people. The strangers who shared his love for the grotesque, the strange, the disturbing. He wasn't alone in this. Every night, the familiar usernames would light up in the chat rooms, each person contributing their own stories, their own experiences. Jared's account was a fairly low-profile one. He wasn't a big name, not a famous figure in these circles, but he was respected. He had been there long enough, shared enough twisted tales of his own, and participated in enough forums that his name had weight. Or so he thought. But lately, something felt off. It started small, just an odd comment here and there. At first, he didn't think much of it. After all, people were always trying to get attention in these places, and that was just part of the game. But as the days passed, the comments started becoming more frequent, more personal. Nice story you shared last night, Jared. I'm sure you have more hidden somewhere, don't you? The comment was from someone he didn't recognize. It was eerie, the way they knew exactly what he had shared, what he had written. He dismissed it, shrugged it off as just another user who had read his posts. But then, the messages kept coming. It wasn't long before Jared began to notice patterns. The anonymous account would reply to his posts almost immediately, sometimes before he even had a chance to see them. And these messages weren't just about his stories. No, they were about him. His life. The things he had mentioned in passing during casual chats or during late-night discussions about random topics. The more these messages came, the more uncomfortable Jared felt. It wasn't like they were threatening him, not exactly. There were no demands or insults, just an overwhelming feeling of being watched. It was as if this person was learning everything about him, observing his every move, and documenting it. I know you don't like talking about your childhood, but you've mentioned your dad before. I wonder what he would think about your stories. Jared's stomach turned. How did this stranger know about his father? He never mentioned his dad in any of his posts. Not like this. He didn't even talk about his family at all. The unsettling feeling crept deeper, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. The messages, at first seemingly harmless, now felt invasive, like someone was inside his head, watching his every move. He tried to ignore it. Tried to push the thoughts aside and focus on what he had always done, share his stories, interact with the people he knew, and pretend like everything was fine. But it wasn't. The messages kept coming, more and more personal, more disturbing. I saw the picture you posted on your other account. You look good, Jared. That was from your trip to the beach last summer, right? Looks like you're enjoying yourself more than you're letting on. Jared froze. The picture they were referring to was an old one, taken years ago, during a rare vacation he had actually enjoyed with a few friends. He had posted it on a private account, one that he rarely used. It wasn't linked to any of his more public profiles. No one from the chat room, no one from the forums, should have known about it. Yet, this person had seen it. This stranger had found it. And not only that, he had analyzed it. Commented on it like they had been there with him, like they had seen everything. Fear set in, but Jared couldn't bring himself to leave the forums. It was the only place where he felt like he could express himself, where he could exist without judgment. He couldn't abandon it now. So, he did the only thing he knew how to do, he ignored it. He buried himself in more posts, more comments, hoping that if he kept his head down, the strange messages would stop. But they didn't. They only escalated. Your house is nice. You've done a good job with your space. I bet you spend a lot of time there, don't you? Jared's hands trembled as he read the message. His heart pounded in his chest. The fear was suffocating now, every inch of his skin crawling with the sensation of being watched. He glanced nervously around his room. There was no one here. No one could be watching him. Not like this. He hadn't posted any pictures of his house. He hadn't said anything about where he lived. And yet, somehow, this stranger knew everything. That was when Jared started to investigate. He combed through the messages, rereading each one with growing dread. The more he analyzed them, the more he realized how much this person knew. They knew things no one should have known. Little details. Minor observations that could only come from watching him, following him, learning his patterns. You drink too much coffee at night. Your eyes are always red by the time you log off. Have you thought about cutting back? The details were too accurate, too precise to be random. They were watching him. There was no other explanation. The person had been studying him, waiting for the right moment to make their presence known. And now that they had, Jared was powerless to stop it. But it didn't stop there. One night, the messages became more sinister. I've been watching your streams, Jared. I've seen you play, seen you talk about your favorite games. It's funny, you don't like horror games. But I can see why. You wouldn't handle the real thing. The message was cold, taunting. Jared's blood ran cold. He had never shared his dislike for horror games in any forum post, not in any stream. He had kept that little detail to himself. But somehow, this person knew it. They knew him better than anyone, better than even his friends did. His eyes darted around the room, his mind racing. He tried to shake the feeling off, but it was impossible. The walls were closing in on him. He couldn't breathe. He opened his window, hoping the cool night air would help calm his nerves, but the fear stayed with him, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. Then, a new message popped up, I've been to your house. You didn't think I could find you, did you? Jared froze. His heart skipped a beat. The message didn't just chill him, it paralyzed him. He read it over and over again, trying to make sense of it. How could this person have been to his house? How could they know where he lived? There was no way they could have, he never mentioned it. Never gave any hint about his location. But as his mind raced, the truth hit him. This person had been following him, tracking his every move, not just online but in the real world. They had found his house. They had been watching him, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment when they could make their move. The walls of his room suddenly felt too small. He wasn't alone. Jared wasn't just being stalked online. He was being hunted, and the hunter knew exactly where to find him. The game had changed. Now, it was real. And he was the one who was being watched. Samantha had always thought of herself as cautious. She had grown up in a world where privacy was a luxury and being watched was a constant, unnoticed presence. She'd learned to navigate the digital world carefully, keeping her personal information behind layers of firewalls, encryptions, and passwords. She wasn't like some of her friends who overshared everything on social media. Her posts were curated, controlled. She didn't even use her real name in some of her accounts. For her, anonymity was a shield. She liked the distance it provided, being able to connect with people without ever really letting them know who she was. But recently, that shield had started to feel less like protection and more like a prison. It all began with a comment. Just a single, innocuous message on one of her old blog posts. It wasn't the content of the message that struck her, it was the tone, the immediacy of it. "I remember when you wrote this. It's been so long, hasn't it?" She frowned as she read it. She hadn't even thought about that blog in years. She couldn't even remember when she had posted it, but this person did. They had mentioned a detail in her post that no one could possibly remember, and certainly not someone who wasn't actively following her. The odd thing was that the account was completely anonymous, just another blank profile with no personal information, no pictures, and no mutual followers. Samantha brushed it off, but as the days passed, the comments kept coming. More messages, each one eerily specific, referring to posts she had made months or even years ago. "You used to talk about your favorite book all the time. Have you read it recently? I remember when you posted about your trip to New York. It looked so much fun. You really seemed happy then." The messages weren't threatening, not overtly, but they unsettled her. There was something about them, something about the way this person seemed to know so much about her life, her likes, her dislikes, the things she used to care about. At first, it was like a harmless game. But soon, it felt more invasive, more personal. It was as if this person was shadowing her life, tracking her movements, piecing together fragments of her past in a way that made her feel exposed. One evening, as she was sitting on her couch, scrolling through her phone, she came across another comment. "I've been looking at your recent posts. You've really changed, haven't you? It's almost like you're a different person now." Samantha stared at the screen, her stomach tightening. She had barely posted anything lately. Her recent updates were all mundane things, pictures of her dog, a shot of her morning coffee, a photo of the sunset. But this person had noticed the change, the subtle shift in her online presence. They had noticed things she hadn't even realized herself. Things about her own behavior, her interests, even her mood. It felt invasive, like they were reading between the lines of every post she made. She tried to block the account, but it didn't work. Another message came through the next day, this time on a completely different platform. "I saw your post on Facebook. You're really good at hiding, aren't you?" Samantha's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't posted anything on Facebook in ages. It wasn't a platform she used much anymore, and when she did, it was always something innocuous, something meaningless. She had set her privacy settings carefully, ensured that only her closest friends could see anything on her profile. But somehow, this person had found her. They had been watching her, tracking her across platforms, collecting every piece of information they could. It wasn't just the comments anymore. The person had started sending her private messages, messages that felt more like commands than questions. "You shouldn't go to that place alone, Samantha. It's dangerous. I saw you walking down Main Street yesterday. You looked lost. Are you okay?" The worst part was that these messages weren't coming in after the fact, they were coming in while she was still out, while she was still in the middle of whatever she was doing. It was like they knew exactly where she was, what she was doing, at any given moment. The thought made her skin crawl. She began to feel like she was being hunted, as if someone was always a step behind her, watching her every move. The final straw came one night when she was at her apartment, scrolling through her phone as usual. She was in the middle of texting a friend when she got a new notification. It was from an unknown number. The message simply read, "I can see you." Samantha's heart stopped. Her hands shook as she read the message again, her mind scrambling to make sense of it. She looked around her apartment, her eyes darting from the dark corners of the room to the closed windows. She felt a cold draft and turned to look at the balcony door. It was locked. She had locked it herself before sitting down, but suddenly, the feeling of safety that the lock had once offered seemed irrelevant. She quickly checked the phone number, but it was just a random string of digits. No way to trace it, no way to figure out who had sent it. But the words, "I can see you," hung in the air like a heavy weight, suffocating her. Her mind raced. How could this person know where she was? How could they know she was alone in her apartment, sitting on the couch, just minutes before receiving the message? The panic she had been holding at bay for so long bubbled to the surface. She couldn't ignore this anymore. She couldn't pretend it was just a coincidence. This person had crossed a line. They were no longer just lurking in the background of her online life, they were in her real world, watching her. She locked her phone and stood up, pacing around the apartment. What was she supposed to do? She had no idea who this person was, no idea how they were tracking her. Every instinct in her body screamed to go to the police, but something held her back. What would she say? How could she explain this? Could they even do anything? How could they prove that this was more than just some random creep? What if it was nothing? What if she was just being paranoid? But the messages kept coming. Every day, they came. Some on social media, some via text, and some through email. It was like they were everywhere, haunting her in the digital spaces she once felt safe in. The worst part was that there was no way to escape. Even when she tried to block one account, another would pop up. She would delete a message, and another would appear almost immediately. It was relentless. A week passed, and Samantha found herself barely leaving her apartment. She was too afraid to go outside, too afraid to go anywhere alone. Every little noise made her jump, every shadow seemed to carry a threat. She kept the curtains closed during the day, and at night, she double-checked the locks on her doors and windows. The idea that someone could be watching her from the outside, right out there in the dark, just beyond her walls, felt more and more real every day. Then, one night, as she was scrolling through her phone, she saw something that made her blood run cold. It was another comment from the same anonymous account, but this time, it was different. This one wasn't about her online life. It wasn't about the things she posted or the places she went. It was about something real. Something she had never shared. You're afraid to go outside because you know I'm watching. You won't go to the coffee shop down the street, will you? I've been sitting there for hours, waiting for you. Her breath caught in her throat. She had never mentioned that coffee shop to anyone. It was a small, quiet place she liked to go when she wanted to be alone, to clear her head. She hadn't told anyone about it, hadn't posted anything about it online. But this person knew. They had been there, waiting. They were watching her. Terror gripped her chest as she realized the full extent of what was happening. She wasn't just being stalked online. This person had crossed over into her reality. They had found her. And now, they were waiting. Waiting for her to slip up. Waiting for the moment when they could make their move. Ben had always loved the thrill of the unknown. As a writer, he spent his nights diving into the darkest corners of the internet, seeking stories of the strange, the unexplainable, the horrifying. It was his escape, his way of feeling like he was living on the edge without ever having to leave the comfort of his small, cluttered apartment. The faint hum of his computer, the soft tapping of his keyboard, and the dim light of his desk lamp created the perfect atmosphere for diving into these eerie tales. But lately, as he spent more time researching his next big piece, something had shifted. It started as an odd feeling, like being watched. He had gotten used to the odd comments on his posts. Being a writer for a niche horror website, he had become familiar with the kinds of strange messages that would come his way. Most were from fans who enjoyed his work, simple messages of praise or questions about his writing. Others were more bizarre, like cryptic messages or accounts claiming to have experienced something even stranger than the stories he shared. But these comments were always expected. The ones that started appearing on his blog posts, though, were different. At first, it was just an occasional comment, something that seemed harmless, like a fan asking questions about his process or the inspirations for his stories. But then the comments became more frequent, more intense. Do you ever wonder who reads your stories, Ben? Do you ever wonder who's really out there? The message sent a ripple of unease down his spine. It wasn't the usual type of comment he received. It felt too pointed, too direct. As if someone knew something about him that they shouldn't. At first, he ignored it. He told himself it was just an odd fan, someone trying to be funny or maybe even flirty. But when the comments kept coming, each one getting progressively more unsettling, he started to feel a growing sense of dread. The anonymous user began to comment on his past posts, referencing obscure details that only someone close to him would know. I see you like to write late at night, after the lights go out. Does it make you feel safe, Ben? Or do you feel like something's watching you in the dark? Ben had never written about his personal habits on his blog, never mentioned his late-night writing routines. How could this person know that? His pulse quickened, and a chill crept up his back. His mind raced, trying to piece together how someone could have found out something so personal. It wasn't just the comments themselves that unnerved him, it was the way this person seemed to be getting inside his head. Ben's thoughts began to spiral. Who could this be? It wasn't a fan, he was sure of that. Fans didn't make comments like these. Fans didn't talk about his routines, his fears, his private life. Someone was out there, watching him. Someone was following him. And the more he thought about it, the more it started to consume him. He tried to shake off the feeling, to tell himself it was all in his head, but it didn't go away. The messages became more frequent. I'm waiting for you to write your next story, Ben. It's going to be your best one yet. You've got it in you. I know you do. The next night, as he sat at his desk, his fingers frozen above the keyboard, another message popped up. This one was different. More direct. I've been following you for a long time, Ben. I know where you live. I know what you do. And I know what you're writing. Ben's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the screen. He didn't know how to react. His eyes flicked nervously to the window, to the dark alley outside his apartment, the streetlights casting long shadows. His apartment was on the second floor, facing the back of the building, and the street was always quiet at night. There was no reason for anyone to be watching him, no reason for anyone to be lurking in the dark outside his window. But the thought wouldn't leave his mind. The idea that someone he didn't know, was watching him, tracking him, was overwhelming. He sat there, frozen, for what felt like hours. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the occasional click of his mouse or the soft hum of his computer. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his breath, but when he opened them, he saw something that made his stomach drop, a shadow outside his window. The flickering streetlight cast a faint outline of someone, standing just beneath the window, unmoving. His heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't make out any details, but the shape was unmistakable. It was a person. The figure was tall and thin, standing motionless in the dark. Ben's hands trembled as he reached for his phone, quickly turning off the light to avoid being seen. His pulse raced as he tried to keep calm, but all he could hear was the sound of his own breathing. The figure remained there, its presence a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. He had no idea how long the person had been there. Could they see him too? Ben's thoughts were spinning out of control. His mind raced through every possibility, every worst-case scenario. Had someone found him? Was this a stalker? A fan who had taken things too far? Or worse, was this person something else entirely? Was he caught in some twisted game he didn't understand? He leaned closer to the window, trying to get a better look, but the figure didn't move. It stood there, unmoving, like a dark silhouette in the night. Was it waiting for something? Was it waiting for him to make the first move? Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his hand, breaking his concentration. He glanced down at the screen, his breath catching in his throat as he read the message. I see you, Ben. I'm right here. Don't be scared. You're going to write something great tonight. You always do. The message was from the same anonymous account. It was chilling, taunting. It was like they were inside his mind, watching his every move, dictating what he did, what he thought. Ben's skin crawled as he backed away from the window, his fingers instinctively clutching his phone as if it could offer him any protection. The street outside was empty again. The figure was gone. But Ben couldn't shake the feeling that they had been there, right in front of him. In a panic, he slammed his laptop shut, but even that didn't bring him comfort. He felt trapped, like the walls of his apartment were closing in on him. There was nowhere to go, no one he could turn to. He was alone, isolated, and the thought that someone was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake, was too much to bear. His mind raced through every possible option, but there was no easy escape. He couldn't call the police. They would never believe him. It was just a feeling, a thought, a fear he couldn't prove. Who would take him seriously? But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to shut out the racing thoughts in his head, he heard it again, a faint tapping at his window. He froze. There it was again, unmistakable. A sound from outside. A quiet tapping, like someone lightly knocking against the glass. Ben's breath caught in his throat. He didn't dare move. His entire body was frozen in place, paralyzed by the fear that had taken root deep in his bones. The tapping continued, slow and rhythmic, almost deliberate. "I'm not alone," he thought. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure whether the terror he felt was real or if it had all been conjured from his own mind. Either way, it didn't matter. Because the nightmare had come to life. The tapping stopped, but the silence that followed was just as suffocating. Ben waited, listening, but the only sound was the faint hum of the city outside his window. The next morning, he woke up with a start, the events of the night flooding back to him. The tapping. The messages. The figure outside his window. He sat up, his heart still racing, as he scanned his apartment, half expecting to see someone standing there, watching him. But there was nothing, no sign of anyone, no trace of the figure. But then his phone buzzed again. "Good morning, Ben. I see you're awake. Time to get to work." The message came with a photo attached. It was a picture of his apartment building taken from across the street. It was blurry, but there was no mistaking it. His building, his windows, his life, being watched. Ellie had always been an early riser. It was one of the things that made her feel in control, in command of her day before the world had a chance to overwhelm her. The quiet of the morning, the soft light of dawn filtering through her blinds, and the comfort of her cup of coffee were all she needed to feel centered. But today, the morning quiet felt more oppressive than peaceful. It was as if the silence in her apartment had grown too thick, like the air itself was pressing down on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It had been going on for days now, the unsettling sense that someone was watching her. She kept telling herself it was just stress, that the long hours at work and her recent move to this new city were starting to get to her. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just in her head. It had started small. A few weeks ago, she'd noticed an anonymous account following her on Instagram. Nothing unusual about that. She was a young woman living in a city, posting the usual selfies, photos of her meals, the occasional inspirational quote. But it wasn't just the following that caught her attention, it was the comments. At first, they were innocuous enough. "Cute photo. You should show more of your outfits." But then they started to shift. "I can tell you're wearing that shirt because you're feeling brave today." Or, "You look so sad in this one. Hope everything's okay." It wasn't that the comments were aggressive or overtly threatening, it was the timing. Every post she made, every story she shared, this person seemed to know exactly what was going on in her life. It was as if they could see straight through her carefully curated online persona, into the hidden corners of her thoughts and emotions. Ellie tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just some odd coincidence. After all, people were strange online. Maybe it was just an overly invested fan, or someone who had picked up on the smallest details. But the comments kept coming, more frequently, more precisely. "I noticed you were looking for a new job. I'm sure you'll find something soon. You've got the skills." She had posted a vague status update about feeling stuck in her current position, but it was so general that anyone could have made that assumption. Still, it was uncanny. Who was this person? And how were they tracking every little detail of her life? It was only when she went to meet a friend for coffee one afternoon that the unease fully took hold. As she sat in the bustling cafe, scrolling through her phone, Ellie saw a new message from the same anonymous account. "I see you're at Cafe Bella. It's nice there, isn't it? I know you come here a lot. They make the best cappuccinos." Her heart stopped. She looked up from her phone, scanning the room. Nothing. No one seemed to be paying her any attention. But the words on her screen felt suffocating. How could they know where she was? She had never shared her location with anyone online, she was careful about that. She had never checked into the cafe, never tagged the location. Yet, somehow, this person knew exactly where she was. The cafe felt suddenly too small, too confining. She tried to ignore the message, to focus on her conversation with her friend, but the weight of it lingered in the back of her mind. How was this happening? How did they know? She forced herself to push it out of her thoughts, but when she got home that evening, the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. It wasn't just on Instagram anymore. The messages began appearing across all her social media platforms. Snapchat, Facebook, even her rarely used LinkedIn account. There was always the same eerie precision. You've been working late this week. I hope you're taking care of yourself. You deserve to rest. It wasn't the comments themselves that unnerved her, it was how they felt. Every single word seemed to speak directly to her, as if this person wasn't just observing her life, but actively participating in it. It was like they knew her better than anyone else. Better than her closest friends. Better than she knew herself. She tried blocking the account, but it was always one step ahead. It would pop up again under a different name, a different email, always the same haunting comments. I see you're thinking about going to the gym again. I'm sure you'll be back to your old routine soon. This one made her stomach turn. She hadn't posted anything about her fitness routine, hadn't mentioned it to anyone. It was something personal, something she kept to herself. So how did this person know? How had they connected the dots between her old posts and her new habits? It didn't stop there. One morning, after another night of restless sleep, Ellie woke up to find a new message waiting for her. It was from the same anonymous account, of course. I'm in the building across from yours right now. I can see you through your window. Her blood ran cold as she stared at the words. The message had come through on her phone, but it felt as if the world had gone silent. How could they know which building she lived in? How could they be so close? The anxiety hit her in waves, crashing over her with the force of a tidal wave. She rushed to the window, her hands trembling as she peeked through the blinds. The street outside looked empty. There was no one standing across the way, no one looking up at her apartment. But the message was clear. I can see you. She spent the next few hours in a haze of panic. She locked every door and window, checked the peephole on her door a dozen times, and paced around her apartment, too paranoid to sit still. Was someone really watching her? Was this person lying, trying to freak her out, or were they telling the truth? And if they were telling the truth, how had they gotten so close? The messages didn't stop. They kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. I noticed you changed your profile picture today. You look so much happier in this one. But why do you hide your smile? Are you afraid someone will see it? Ellie wanted to scream. She hadn't posted anything in days. Hadn't changed her profile picture. But the message was too specific. Too real. It was as if this person had been watching her every move. Every little detail. She couldn't tell anyone about it. Who would believe her? Who would understand the creeping dread, the sense of violation, of being followed at every turn, even when you're alone in your own apartment? Her friends would think she was being dramatic. Her family would brush it off. And the more she thought about it, the more ridiculous it seemed to even consider that someone was watching her. But the feeling wouldn't go away. The feeling that she wasn't alone. That someone, somewhere, knew everything about her. One night, as she was sitting in bed, scrolling mindlessly through her phone, the message came again. This time, it was different. The account had changed again, a new name, a new email. But this time, there was a photo attached. Her heart stopped when she saw it. The photo was grainy, poorly taken, but unmistakable. It was of her, standing on her balcony earlier that day, her back to the camera, looking out over the city. She hadn't even known anyone was there. There was no sound, no warning, no indication that someone had been watching her. But there it was, undeniable. Someone had taken a picture of her, standing alone, in her own apartment, in the middle of the day. The message that came with the photo was simple: I'm closer than you think. Ellie dropped her phone onto the bed, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in on her, the air thick with the weight of the realization that she wasn't safe, that someone was out there, always watching, always waiting for the right moment. She didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to escape this invisible presence that had wormed its way into her life. The fear was suffocating. There was no safe place anymore. No corner of her apartment, no time of day when she could escape the feeling that someone was watching her, that they knew everything about her, down to the smallest details. The anonymity of it all, the fact that this person could slip in and out of her life without ever being seen, without leaving a trace, was what terrified her the most. She couldn't run, she couldn't hide. The messages kept coming. The photos kept appearing. And the feeling of being watched never stopped. It was always there, lurking in the background, just beyond her reach. Every time she thought she could breathe, It would creep back into her thoughts, into her life. Always watching. Always waiting. And Ellie knew, deep down, that there was no way out of this nightmare. It was nearly 3 a.m. when Liam received the first of many messages that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was lying in bed, his mind too active to sleep, scrolling absent-mindedly through his phone. The glow from the screen was the only light in the room, and outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes. The silence inside was heavy, almost suffocating. He had been feeling off for days, restless, uneasy, but tonight, the discomfort had reached a new level. As he clicked on an unread notification, he froze. It wasn't a message from a friend or a group chat. No, this one was different. It came from an anonymous account, one with a blank profile and no followers. At first, it seemed like a simple comment, a benign phrase, maybe even something he could shrug off. "I know what you did last weekend." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. It wasn't a message that demanded a reply or threatened anything overtly. But it was unsettling. Deeply unsettling. Liam had done nothing out of the ordinary the weekend before. Or at least, he thought he hadn't. He was at home, just like he always was. He hadn't seen anyone outside of his usual circle of friends. He certainly hadn't posted anything online that could give someone clues about his whereabouts. The message lingered in his mind long after he had closed the app. What did it mean? How could this stranger know something about him that he didn't share with anyone? The more he thought about it, the more his thoughts spiraled. It was easy to dismiss things when they were fleeting, but this message felt different. It felt like someone had seen something. The next morning, the message was still on his mind, gnawing at him as he went about his day. He tried to ignore it. He had work to do, errands to run, and people to see. But the thought of that simple sentence kept returning, like an itch he couldn't scratch. It made him feel exposed, vulnerable, as if someone had been watching him without his knowledge. He glanced nervously at his phone throughout the day, half expecting to see another message, but the day passed without incident. That night, as Liam settled back into his bed, he could hardly shake the feeling of being followed. It was like someone was lurking just outside his line of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. He kept his phone on his nightstand, but he didn't check it. He didn't need to. The silence was too thick, too oppressive. Then, it came again. A new message. "I saw you when you were walking your dog this morning. You looked lost in thought. Do you always walk that way, or was today different?" Liam's blood ran cold. He had indeed taken his dog for a walk that morning, around the same time every day. It was a routine he'd kept for months, a small comfort in his otherwise monotonous life. But how could this stranger know where he had been, what he had been doing? It was a mundane activity, something he wouldn't think twice about, except now, it felt like it was being held up to a spotlight. Liam immediately checked his social media, his location settings. He hadn't posted about the walk, hadn't checked in anywhere. There was no reason for anyone to know that he had been walking his dog. And yet, this person had known. The message was more than just an observation, it was a violation. A clear indication that someone had been watching him, following his every move. Panic started to settle in as the messages continued. They didn't threaten him directly, but they knew things he hadn't shared with anyone. "You should be more careful at night, Liam. The neighborhood is quiet, but it's easy to get lost in the dark. I know you're not used to it, but maybe it's time to leave your house. You've been spending too much time alone lately." The comment about him spending too much time alone was what tipped him over the edge. He wasn't a particularly social person, but it wasn't like he had made it obvious. He hadn't posted about his isolation. It wasn't something he had even thought about recently, but this person knew. And if they knew that, what else did they know? For the next few days, Liam tried everything to break the cycle. He changed his phone number, deleted accounts he rarely used, even tried to block the anonymous user. But the messages kept coming. They were relentless, persistent, and everyone seemed to know a little more about him than the last. They had somehow learned details about his routines, his habits, the things that made him feel safe. "I know you're thinking of going to the coffee shop tomorrow. The one on Elm Street, right? I saw you there last week. You always sit by the window and stare out at the traffic. It's peaceful, I know. But maybe you're being too obvious.